Hello again everybody, this is part 2 of the radioactivity in medicine session. You might have done the other one yesterday, looked at part 1, or you might be binge watching these to get the topic all done and dusted. But normally this will sort of take over 2 lessons really, I suppose, so this is the second part of it, looking at radioactivity in medicine for this one. We looked previously at internal and external radiotherapy, the treatment of conditions using radioactive materials. We looked at the sort of start of what a PET scanner was. Hopefully you can remember what a PET scanner stands for. Rolling that over in your head. Positron emission tomography. And about why the isotopes used in those have to be produced nearby. We also introduced the exciting sounding concept of annihilation. Hopefully we can still spell it with double N at the beginning. And then also we're going to look at the use of radioactive tracers in diagnosis. And then towards the end of this session there'll be various activities that you need to do by pausing the video and using one of the sheets that I've sent out with this lesson. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, tracers we saw are radioactive isotopes that attached to other molecules that the body uses, injected or breathed into the body. Again, we can have several key ways of getting things into the body, injected or breathed into that one. So, sorry, while we're into this one, so we need to think they're absorbed into specific parts of the body and they're detected with a PET scan, and they need to have short half-lives, and we need to explore and understand why they need to have short half-lives for this, because we're either injecting them into the body or breathing them into the body, but either way they're getting into the body, and therefore short half-life is an important consideration, obviously. So different isotopes are used for different types of diagnosis and treatment. Okay, what would need to be considered when you choose an isotope for some kind of diagnosis or treatment? Okay, so armed with that question and answer them in full sentences, okay, what would we need to consider when choosing an isotope? Okay, so pause the video and write down what you think would be a decent response, probably a 2 marker, for what would need to be considered when choosing an isotope for use in diagnosis and treatment, but as a tracer. One is going to get put inside the body. So pause the vid and we'll come back when you're ready. Okay, hopefully you've written some answers, and these should hopefully contain statements like this. The half-life needs to be considered. Okay, we need things with short half-lives so they don't stay in the body for very long, causing other damage. Obviously, you know, the use of radioactivity in treatment and diagnosis is a balancing act. You've got to weigh up. Well, the medical professionals have to weigh up the benefits to the patient by using it for diagnosis or treatment against the risks generally from ionizing radiation, which we do know about. So again, it's a balancing act that educated medical professionals will weigh up as to what is the appropriate way of doing it. The type of radiation it produces. Obviously, we know things about alpha, beta, gamma, and positron radiation. So we need to consider which radiation that tracer, that radioisotope, will produce. Some more dangerous than others in the body, so we need to consider that, and also whether that radioisotope can be attached to molecules that are used in certain parts of the body. I mentioned in the previous lesson that glucose obviously is used extensively in the body as a source of energy, or you know, the fuel for respiration, and therefore, you know, if you can attach a radioisotope to a glucose molecule, the complicated thing that it is, then it's going to get taken around the body, and it's going to really be found at the site of a great deal of respiration, isn't it? Because glucose for respiration, if there's a lot of respiration going on, you need a lot of glucose. So if you've got a radioisotope attached to the glucose, wherever that respiration is taking place, there will be a concentration of radioactivity. Should say at that point really, which is why it's important that the patient is sort of lying still really during this, because obviously the patient's active, there's respiration happening in many sites in the body. Whereas really what we want is to see that, you know, the cell division where that's happening in cancerous tumours is the key site that the respiration happens and glucose goes to. But it's no good if you're exercising at the time, because there's respiration happening elsewhere. So that would have been a decent. Any 2 of those would have been a decent answer. Examples of tracers. This is for information only, sort of give you an idea and a bit of a flavour of what things are and where they go to and how they're used and different types. You don't need to know the individual names of these things, but you need to be aware of the general idea that, you know, different tracers, different molecules go to different parts of the body, and different radioisotopes are used. So the idea of it's important, not the specific types. So if we look at this, for different parts of the body, technetium-99m is attached to a drug that collects in the brain. So if we're interested in activity in the brain, etc., or something going on in there, technetium-99 would be a useful radioisotope to use a tracer there. Iodine-123 is absorbed in the thyroid gland, and again, that's a very, very, very useful radioisotope, because iodine the thyroid needs iodine anyway. It's absolutely essential to that. And the fact there's a ready-made radioactive version of iodine, 123 as a mass number, is important there. Krypton gas. Now that's very useful because it's a radioactive gas, and therefore it can be inhaled into the lungs to investigate lung function. And obviously, sadly, lung cancer is a very fairly common form of cancer. So if we're looking at lung function, then krypton as a gas, as a radioactive gas, can be used there. Iodine, again, a different isotope, iodine-125 as opposed to 123, into a compound that is excreted by the kidney. So if we're looking at kidney function and that part of the body, we might use iodine-125 as an isotope attached to a tracer for there. Indium-111 can be attached to white blood cells to locate infections. So we've got white blood cells, obviously they're going to be moved around to fighting infections. So wherever they're fighting infections, if we can get some radioactive white cells or things attached to white cells, that will show us where the sites of infections are, and we can use things like PT scanners to see where those are being concentrated, and therefore that will give it indication of where the infection are. So there's an example of a range of different radioisotopes that are used with tracers, to be tracers attached to other molecules. So again, it's really essential. You're not injecting that neat into the body, it's usually attached to another molecule that the body will use. Okay, questions to answer then, with a video pause, would be these. 3 ways a tracer could be administered. A reason why a tracer must be a gamma emitter, or often a gamma emitter. Thinking about these are inside the body. Describe how a tracer could be used to detect a source of internal bleeding. And explain why tumour detection requires the use of radioactive glucose. Okay, and the first one we've discussed 2, but the third one hopefully you can get by just knowing things or thinking about how you get things into the body. Okay, for that one, so pause the video, jot down your answers to those questions, and come back when you've done that. Hopefully you've written the answers to your questions and you're not going to cheat. And if we're ready, let's have a look at the answers to those and what would be good answers using appropriate knowledge for GCSE. Okay, the numbering's got a bit awry here, but number 2. Give 3 ways a tracer could be administered. We can inject into the bloodstream, we can swallow it. Again, it can be taken in through the digestive system or inhaled. So we talked injected and inhaled, but of course you can actually eat things, and people eat what are sometimes called barium meals. You eat something with radioactive material in it and it'll go through your digestive system if the general area of interest is your digestive system. So there's those 3 there. Tracer must be a gamma emitter. Okay, alpha and beta will be absorbed by the body tissues. Yeah, alpha is hugely ionizing, will be very, very dangerous within the body, as we know from Alexander Litvinenko. Beta would be absorbed by the body tissues. It doesn't have a huge range, but gamma emitter would get out of the body, wouldn't it? It's got to pass out of the body to be detected by a PET scanner, and therefore gammas are what you want. Most of these, alpha wouldn't get out at all because it'd be blocked by the skin on its way out, having done a lot of damage on its way there. But and beta would be blocked. You wouldn't get much coming out, but gamma can pass through the body, out of the body, through the skin, and be detected by the PET scanner. The tracer could be used to detect the source, inject it into the blood, and the areas with the highest amount of gamma, as revealed, would show whether any bleeding is there. Okay, we're pinpointing areas where there's high incidence of radioactivity. And finally, why tumour detection requires use of radioactive glucose, it's because cancer cells are very, very active. It's uncontrolled cell division, as you may have seen on the introductory video that I put on the lesson materials. Cancer cells are very active and take up glucose more quickly than most other cells. So if they're taking up glucose quickly, they will be taking up the radioactive isotope attached to that glucose, and therefore there'll be a sort of a hot spot, a bright spot in the imaging that will show that. Okay, so if you didn't reflect on your answers, is there anything else you need to add to your notes and understanding to enable you to answer those questions? More activities for you to have a go at. These sentences show how a PET scanner works. Put them in the correct order. So again, this is another pause the video and then work out. You don't have to write out the whole statement unless you really want to, but you need to put them in order to tell the story of how a PET scanner works. And again, this links to last lesson's work as well. So let's have a pause the video and have a go at those, put them in the order that makes sense. You have paused the video, haven't you? Good. Okay, hopefully you've come back and put those sentences into order, and this would be the most logical and sensible order of them. A, C, F, E, G, D. A tracer that undergoes positron, beta plus positron decay is attached to a molecule that collects in the tumour, e.g. glucose. The patient is injected with the tracer. When nuclei in the tracer decay, they emit positrons. When positron meets an electron, they are both destroyed. You might have used the word annihilation, but I'm not much space. And 2 gamma rays are emitted in opposite directions. The PET scanner detects the gamma rays and calculates where the radiation came from. The PET scanner moves around the patient to detect lots of pairs of gamma rays, and then the computer builds up the image of inside the patient. And again, the tomography is doing it in slices, so as you move the patient through, you build up a 3D picture of the size of the tumour as well as its location. So hopefully you got those in the right order and it makes sense. If you didn't, can you see why you didn't? And if you're still not sure, bring it to the tutorial that we'll have through a Teams meeting in the very near future. Another task for you to do, because this is the second lesson of the 2, explain which of these gamma emitting isotopes in the table on the top right would be best used for the following: external radiotherapy, a radioactive seed, making a tracer, making a radioactive wire that will be inserted near a tumour and then removed when the patient's received a large enough dose. Perhaps that's the one that we saw being put into somebody's lung through their windpipe, etc. And challenge activity, because you're bright people. Compare and contrast the use of palladium-103, up here, with technetium-99 for medical purposes. So given the properties that you've got here, and they're all gamma emitters, compare and contrast which would, how might they be suited or unsuited for different medical uses. So some questions to pause the video and to have a go at. Answers then, if you've paused the video and had enough time to do that one and I haven't given it all away. To administer external radiotherapy, this is when it's outside the body, so you don't want the thing to have to keep running out and getting new stuff. Okay, so if you have cobalt-60, has got a half-life of 5.3 years. So once you've set up your external radiation sources, it'll be there for a good few years, and that's what you want. You want to be able to use it on a daily basis without having to keep topping it up or changing the source there, because obviously once you start handling and messing around with the radiation, you introduce risks, and we'd rather not do that as far as possible. So with a half-life of 5.5 years, you've got a machine that's probably going to work for 10, 15, 20 odd years without having to be refilled with cobalt-60, because that's external radiotherapy. To make a radioactive seed, something that's implanted in somebody, you want gradual treatment, but it needs to last, quite a while. So if you use palladium-103, 17 days half-life as it decays to half its amount of activity every 17 days. It'll be there for a while. It's gradual treatment. It's probably not that active, but it's going to be around for a fair while, long enough for treatment, but not for years and years and years and years and years. Okay, so it will treat the tumour that's there without exposing the patient for an inappropriately long period of time. Now, to make a tracer, technetium-99, it's got a half-life of 6 hours. So therefore, if we're going to inject it or somehow get it inside the body, we don't want it to hang around in the body too long, because obviously, all ionizing radiation is dangerous to the body. So 6 hours is a decent amount of time there, because within, a day or two, you've probably most of it, most of the activity rate has gone. And of course, the body's natural systems will excrete things that they don't particularly like. So, it'll be moved out of the body. So for, making a tracer 6 hours, and that's another reason why tracers have to be made, very close to the site where they're needed. Because if it's taken 40 minutes to get across one side of the hospital to the other, or longer, or longer in the van as it goes from one place to another, it's decaying away all the time. So tracers, short half-lives in the order of tens of minutes or hours, and are often made right next to the patient's bedside. To make a radioactive wire to be inserted near a tumour, palladium or iridium, either of those will do, or even cobalt-60. There's a range of answers here. Okay, the long half-lives don't matter because the wire's not going to be left in there. It's actually going to be withdrawn. So the fact it's got a long half-life in this instance isn't that critical, because you're actually going to put the wire in there and then take it out away from the patient. So we're controlling the amount of dose the patient receives rather than relying on its half-life because it's inside the body. This is external, it's internal, but it's controlled and removed from the body. So any of those could do it, and if you can justify it, that's fine. The challenge question: compare and contrast the use of palladium-103, technetium for medical purposes. Well, both are gamma emitters, so they can both be used to kill cells. Fundamentally, why are we doing this? Why are we doing radiotherapy? Or to detect tumours for diagnosis, whatever. So they can both be used for that. So they're both, as gamma emitters, are suitable for that one. Technetium's got a short half-life, so it can be used with diagnosis inside the body. Okay, it's got a short half-life, so it has that use, a 6 hours half-life. It emits radiation long enough to diagnose, but won't subject the patients to too much radiation. Palladium-103 could be implanted in a tumour, and its longer half-life of 17 days means it will continue to kill cells for a few weeks, and then effectively it will run out, it will have decayed away to insignificant levels, and hopefully the treatment's been successful and it's done what it needed to do. So some questions there that hopefully you've been able to answer or have a decent stab at, demonstrating and applying your knowledge of radiation. I have got a summary video here, and if I can master the art of changing this, we can actually have a look at this summary video of what we've learned at this time. Okay, so hopefully, without further ado, we're looking at a different video, and we are seeing what this is going to show us.
Radiation can be used to diagnose some medical conditions and can also be used to treat some diseases. Radioactive substances that emit gamma rays can be attached to other molecules and used as tracers. These molecules are then injected into the patient. A gamma camera detects the places where the tracer collects in the body. These images are of a patient's heart after a heart attack. Most gamma camera images are two-dimensional, but sometimes a computer can combine a series of images. This computer animation shows how the heart is beating. Suggest why gamma emitters are used as tracers.
Okay, something we've touched on before, something you need to be able to justify. Why do we use gamma emitters used as tracers? From inside the body, gamma is the only one that can actually get out of the body reliably.
PET scanners can produce a detailed three-dimensional image of the inside of the body. The patient is injected with a tracer that emits positrons. When a positron meets an electron, it emits two gamma rays in opposite directions. The PET scanner detects all the gamma rays given off and uses the information to build up a three-dimensional image of the patient. This model of a patient with lung cancer was built up using a combination of a PET scan and an X-ray scan. It shows the location of the cancerous tumours. What is the advantage of using a PET scanner rather than a gamma camera?
Gamma camera is simply gamma detectors. PT scanner is rather more elaborate.
Cancer is a disease caused when cells grow and divide out of control. Many cancers can be treated if they are detected in time, and radiation can help doctors to do this. Radiation harms cancer cells as they divide rapidly, but it can also harm other rapidly dividing cells such as hair follicles and cells in the gut. This machine is being used for external radiotherapy. Lasers are being used to make sure the radiation is aimed directly at the tumour to reduce the damage to other healthy cells. Internal radiotherapy involves putting radioactive material inside the patient. These are radioactive seeds which will deliver a continuous amount of radiation for some time. The seeds are placed in the body next to the tumour. This reduces the radiation received by other parts of the body. For some cancers, the patient may drink a solution of or be injected with a radioactive source. In this case, the source will be attached to a molecule that is absorbed by the affected organ. Suggest one advantage of having radioactive seeds implanted compared to having external radiotherapy.
Something that you need to be able to do. Okay, the advantage implanted compared to having external? So, hopefully that was useful. The follow-up task for this is a positron PET scanner sheet as is shown here. There are questions. It introduces the idea of PET scans and how they work, and I hope we already knew that. And it talks about PET scans and how they work, and there's a series of questions for you to answer on that, which we can either discuss in the tutorial team session that we'll have, or I'll just simply publish the answers as well, or both. So there's a follow-up task to see how much you've learned and what your understanding is of the use of PET scanners and tracers as radioactivity used in medicine. Hopefully then, after these 2 sessions, we're able to meet all those objectives: internal and external radiotherapy, how PET scanners work for diagnosis and why isotopes have to be produced nearby, and explain how radioactive tracers are used in diagnosis. So 2 sessions, things to do, an important topic, very interesting topic, and hopefully you found that interesting and useful and have done the work to back it up, and your knowledge on this is secure. So well done, and thanks very much. More to follow.